Hello, I'm Rachael Babin from the Oncology Network. Welcome to the Oncology Podcast's Experts on Point series. What is ChatGPT? Will it revolutionise the way patients find healthcare information? How does it compare to Dr. Google's responses? Does it provide accurate and referenced information? What are the benefits and risks of this emerging technology? Join me in the first of two podcasts exploring the fascinating new world of artificial intelligence, chatbots, and ChatGPT. I'm joined by Ganessan Kichenadasse and Ashley Hopkins to discuss their paper on the role of ChatGPT in revolutionising cancer patient information. Ganessan Kichenadasse is a medical oncologist and a pharmacologist in South Australia, and he also lectures at Flinders University. Ashley Hopkins is a pharmacist and lead of the Clinical Cancer Epidemiology Lab at Flinders. This is an area I'm very interested in, and I know it fascinates many of our readers and listeners. This conversation lasted a lot longer than we planned, so we've actually split this podcast into 2 episodes just to make it a bit easier for you to listen to. So if you enjoy this first part, please do join us for episode 19 of Experts on Point, where we will carry on the conversation about the potential uses and abuses of this incredible technology. And just a reminder that to access all of our free podcasts, including our popular series on diagnostics called Beyond the Slide, registered healthcare professionals are invited to join the Oncology Network. Head over to oncologynetwork.com.au to find out more. It's free and registration only takes a moment. This is Rachael Babin and this is the Oncology Podcast. Hi Ash, hi Ganesh. Welcome to the Oncology Podcast's Experts on Point series.
Great to be here, Rachael.
Same.
Now, I always like to start with a personal question, if we may, just so that the listeners can get to know you better. So Ash, you're a pharmacist and the lead at Flinders Clinical Cancer Epidemiology Lab. So how did you get interested in artificial intelligence?
Well, I guess for me, it's probably about understanding what artificial intelligence means in the context of my work. So AI refers to the use of, from my point, machines being able to map inputs to make predictions. So I guess in terms of ChatGPT and a number of different technologies, witnessing the ability to map large amounts of text, graphic, audio, and video data to make and generate predictions in those domains. A lot of my research over time has been around kind of mapping and using clinical data, electronic health records, and trying to use that data to be able to provide personalized predictions to medicines in patients with cancer.
And is it something that you just caught your eye when you were training, or have you always been interested in new technologies?
Well, I mean, a fundamental of what I like to learn is the best way to analyze data sources. So I guess machine learning is something that we're trying to learn and in the field of, I guess, data sciences, whether it's clinical data and electronic health records, to be able to make predictions. So I guess the idea of machines predicting is something that we do. And then ChatGPT is an example of where they're using text data to be able to predict the most appropriate responses to queries in a text type manner. So in essence, it's related to what we do. And the technology is something that can fundamentally change the way in which we provide information to patients being treated with medicines. And as a pharmacist, that definitely caught my eye.
And now to you, Ganesh. What inspired your interest in these emerging technologies in cancer care?
I thank Ash and his colleague, Professor Michael Sorich, to try and inspire me into looking into artificial intelligence and data analysis. I did my PhD in their lab, so that was the initiation into machine learning and artificial intelligence. I'm also a practicing oncologist. As practicing oncologists, we are kind of expected to look at novel therapies, novel diagnostic tools in our practice to help patients navigate the system, navigate the therapeutics. with the pharmacology hat on, I'm interested in early phase drug development. So I was looking at, is there an opportunity to use artificial intelligence to identify novel targets or novel ways of treating established targets? That was the beginning of my exposure into machine learning and artificial intelligence. I'm still in my early part of learning about this. I never learned about AIs or machine learning until maybe 12 months ago. I'm still in my nursery school, I would say.
Excellent. Thank you. And was he a good PhD student, Ash?
One of the best. I learn a lot from Ganesh, both from his ability to track through large amounts of information, whether it's in the clinical domain or the statistics. So I would say it was very much a collaboration.
Lovely. So we will move on to what we're here to discuss today. Now, you both recently published a paper called Artificial Intelligence Chatbots Will Revolutionize How Cancer Patients Access Information. So we will include a link to that in the show notes, of course. Just for the broader audience, Ganesh, I'm hoping you can briefly set the scene for us. What are AI chatbots and how do they typically work?
So many of you may have heard about the chatbots, especially ChatGPT. When it came out in November, end of last year, it was a novelty. Now we hear about them increasingly through different technology companies talking about different versions of AI supporting various aspects of what we do. If you reflect on Google search, which has been available for decades now, it was supported by AI. The difference here, the chatbots, is having an information technology which is able to generate text, images, or other media sources in response to prompts put in by people interacting with these chatbots. And the other question which commonly people think about is, what is a GPT and what does GPT stand for? So these are defined as generative artificial intelligence, and GPT in particular stands for generative pre-trained transformer. And what exactly these do, one of the interesting descriptions I come across in an online media platform, a writer describes this as a series of autocomplete-like programs to learn language. And then these programs analyze the statistical properties of the language to make educated guesses based on the words we have typed previously. ChatGPT is one of the many AI chatbots technologies available, and there are big players like Microsoft with its Bing Copilot, Google with Bard, OpenAI, which has now released a new version of ChatGPT 4. And these are all text prompts converting and having a response based on the knowledge generated during the training. So one of the questions which commonly get asked is, how are these chat GPTs applicable in the medical field or health field, especially in the cancer world? And that was the origin of this paper, information. How do people access information? And cancer patients and carers go through Google search, Dr. Google, as commonly said. Google search showed this as one of the treatment options. Can I have such treatment for my condition? So that was the origin of this paper. I'll leave to Ash to talk further about those details.
Yes, thank you, Ganesh. I think you've just highlighted a really interesting nuance that I see with all these new technologies is there's all these incredible computer machine learning technologies, and yet so often it comes back to looking at human behaviors, which are idiosyncratic. I think it's a really fascinating kind of marriage of technology and just our psychologies. So yes, Ash, perhaps now you can talk us through the study design itself. What were you hoping to evaluate and what did you do?
Well, I think what we were trying to forecast was a use case that these language models are going to impact, I guess, the way in which people search for information. That came somewhat from using the tool myself and kind of observing the power of it. And then kind of recognizing that because I had been someone that had started like on the day 3 OpenAI making the tool available, you just got caught up in a world of seeing that 1 million users, 10 million users, 100 million users within 2 months. And these are numbers on a piece of technology that really haven't been seen before. And I guess that flags that people are using it and people probably will continue to use it. And from a health perspective, and just in the way that these models are built and why OpenAI released it, they wanted to test, they wanted to see places where the answers weren't performing as well as what they wanted, and they wanted feedback. So I guess in what we do in our research group is around wanting to track down the best possible information for patients about cancer medicines. And that led to asking ChatGPT questions about cancer medicines, and to some questions it will provide very useful advice, and then to others not so useful. So we wanted to be able to highlight the pros, we wanted to highlight the cons, and also to help educate clinicians that people were going to be using this tool. And I think most people now have heard about it. But when I started, I was probably talking about something that people were like, oh, it's okay, Ash. It'll probably die down. It's not dying down.
So with the study itself, what kind of parameters did you put in place?
Yeah, so I mean, we went relatively basic on the study design, which was to try and track down what questions we thought patients with cancer may ask the internet about cancer. We started with some very simple fact-based questions like what is cancer and what are the most common types of cancers. And then we tried to, I guess, highlight some of the use cases around things that ChatGPT as a language model can answer, but you can't easily track down a human-like response on Google. Our study was designed around recognizing that the technology can provide patients with information, and we wanted to test the ability for ChatGPT to answer a series of fact-based questions about cancer, and then moving on through to some more, I guess, highlighting the power of the chatbot to answer more complex questions in a somewhat conversational tone. So we started with a series of questions on what is cancer, what are the most common types of cancers. So these are kind of fact-based questions, and we moved through to more complex questions such as, is a cough associated with lung cancer? Does pembrolizumab cause a fever, and should I go to hospital? And then we compared the information that we either got from Google in terms of its feature snippet, or colloquially known as the answer, and we compared it against the responses that we got from ChatGPT. So that was essentially what our study design was. So it's relatively simple. Yeah.
And can I ask, in fact, I'll ask you as well, Ganesh, when ChatGPT first came out and you first found out about it, you could first spend that first day playing around with it. What was your kind of human response to it? Were you fearful, or were you quite excited about the possibilities?
I fluctuate. I think it is a first impression. Very excited. What we do has a lot of coding involved in it, and this technology can help a lot with being able to help learn new topics, whether it's health topics, or learn how to code and track down ways to analyze data. So it's great for me personally, but it's also great for being an assistant to helping train students that we have in the lab equally. And these kind of neural network models, I mean, ChatGPT is about language, and it's able to generate new text from particular prompts. But these neural networks are impacting the ability to generate images quite easily. There are tools out there that can take 15 seconds of each of our voices and then combine that with ChatGPT. It can have a conversation that sounds like we're talking. So this kind of generative advancements that are just happening so quickly are also a little bit scary.
Yes, absolutely. And you, Ganesh, were you fearful or excited, or perhaps a mix of the both?
I would say it started with excitement, and having just completed my thesis submission a few months earlier, I was wondering why was not this available to me when I was trying to write my several thousand word thesis.
So your response was more like, oh, why wasn't this a few months earlier? This would have really helped me out.
It was a
Love
year
it.
late, too late. So that was the exact months. I mean, I could see when first time I put in a question and asked the program to write something, in seconds I could see hundreds of words in front of me, almost sounding very professional writing with good English and content. Then when we did this paper, that's when it became clear the factuality of the content. There was no fact checking.
Yeah.
So that
Who is
became scary.
watching the technology? Exactly.
That became scary. And also what Ash was saying already about impersonation, deepfake, and all those are becoming a true prospect. And that is scary. So, and I see already China, EU, the US all trying to regulate how these AI bots are going to be maintained or generated or developed.
Its uses are applied in democracies and then in different political systems. There's another huge can of worms. I'm sure we could do several podcasts on that. So let's go back to your study. So Ash, can you talk us through the results? What did you find out?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's important to contextualize when we were doing the study, which was around the beginning of the year. So there have been major advancements in ChatGPT, moving from GPT-3 to GPT-4, and then understanding that it doesn't matter when across that time spectrum, if you do ask ChatGPT for an answer to a particular question, fundamental to the way the technology works, it will often give you a different set of words to answer the question. Now, it usually give what you would say would be still the right answer, but it would be like getting 10 or 20 different answers from a subset of students who all got the answer right. You wouldn't expect any one of them to give you the same set of words to that particular question. So the questions that we asked of ChatGPT, for the simple questions, simple fact-based questions, like what are the most common types of cancer, it will give answers that include generally the correct listing of what are the most common types of cancer. To those questions, even then you can start to see that maybe you're missing some pieces of information that you would like a reference. It might also start to add in pieces of its own information, trying to make the answer conversational, as you would expect from a person that you were talking to. But it often provides the right answer. And compared to Google, we found that was very similar. And I guess then we move on to more complex questions, which at the time when we saw it, I guess you saw it was probably easier to see some of the limitations of the technology at the time. So when we moved on to investigating adverse events to pembrolizumab and what actions should be taken, we saw probably that at the time, the guardrails were not appropriately calibrated. The question was a little bit complex, so we didn't always get consistency in identifying that pembrolizumab and fever are two linked concepts. And then the idea of providing patient advice, it would not consistently do that either. That was what it was doing at the time. And many of those things are still happening. Although you could go to ChatGPT now and see that the answer would be quite different to what we had in the article. In some ways, that's because it's updated to GPT-4, which is a substantial model upgrade, but also because of just the way in which the technology is built. It's like Ganesh was saying, it's a pre-training, which is the amount of data that comes in, and that's the GPT-4. And then that is followed by a retuning or a fine-tuning, which is, it sounds small, but on OpenAI's kind of scale, it's a massive endeavor to try and set guardrails on how to answer use case questions. And you can see that they've calibrated that in some domains to be a little bit better to say, to identify this is a question that's related to health I'm going to let the user know I'm not a doctor. I think there's many different potential outcomes that could occur to this scenario, and you should talk to your healthcare provider. And it's still in the middle of trying to do that information, it will try and give the answer. And that's what we can see to the questions that we have now, I guess, in terms of regulation and monitoring there are so many different questions. And that's what we're interested in, is probably moving forward, is actually getting answers correct to all questions. Yeah, we can talk about that later. But
And Ganesh, the answers that ChatGPT provides, are they well referenced? Are they correct most of the time?
Yeah, so based on our study as well as studies which have come out subsequently, other researchers have tried to understand the accuracy of the responses provided. Then the percentage, at least in the cancer type of questions, in terms of accuracy, varied from more than 85% to 97% in comparison to established responses people expect for the questions being asked to the GPT. When I was playing with it, I haven't tried the GPT-4. I'm not sure how that will look like in terms of references. If you ask for references, then it can spit out the references it came along. It took the data from or used the data from to provide that response. I'm not sure, Ash, have you tried the GPT-4 to get any references out?
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely tried it. It doesn't matter whether you're using GPT-3 or GPT-4. I mean, GPT-4 is a quality upgrade, but it's poorly references to questions. And I guess in terms of things that I'm interested in at the moment is trying to work through it's about guardrails on how we expect certain types of questions and certain types of domains of questions to be answered as a society. And then I guess from health. In health, we probably really want people to be able to see, where does this information come from? So it's not a standard to provide the source of information to the response. So even if you do request where it comes from, at the moment, it's not a standard to just put it in there. So it will usually get the reference wrong. It does better with websites than it does journals, which I think is important. But I guess also it's about trying to work towards, well, do we want it to identify a health question and then actually just provide the reference source to the information as a standard, as well as providing when or how up to date that piece of information is, would be things that I'm interested in and things that I would be trying to highlight in future research.
I mean, one of the added advantage, I guess, of this GPTs is providing a summary information in an easily understandable form for people with not so scientific knowledge about the problem they're looking to be addressed by these GPTs. That was one. And in terms of referencing, the GPT-3 version we used had input until 2021, if I remember right. It was not in real time, and the sources were not in real time. When I read about GPT-4, it was upgraded to such an extent that it could be real-time referencing. I have to confirm the validity of it because I haven't checked myself. But I've also seen publications showing fake references and fake health professional bodies being created to provide a response. So these are all some of the concerns you need to be aware of.
Yeah. I mean, ChatGPT-4 and the technology has the potential to be integrated into searching for information. So New Bing, if you do use that, which is a chatbot and it has chat function, when you search for a query, it can look through the internet and what's on the internet in terms of trying to answer the question. But GPT-4 itself is very similar in having a finite cut to its data source. So that it's a slight nuance in the way in which, I guess, it functions. So New Bing will try to search the internet. So if you ask it who won, I would say the Super Bowl, but I don't know when the Super Bowl occurred. But if it occurred yesterday, it could probably find that information and integrate it into its language model in terms of its response. but it would do very poorly at trying to track down that information sitting in a very recent journal article, which, I mean, to healthcare then means it doesn't matter if it's GPT-3 or GPT-4. The way in which it currently functions, it would be out of date, which is a severe limitation when we're talking about people using it to search for health information.
So it comes down to, I guess, a question of trust. So, from a patient's point of view, there are lots of patients who are incredibly sort of self-educated about what's happening to them, what their treatment options are going to be. They want to search out information. They are perhaps used to Google pointing them to sources that they know they can trust to a certain extent, WebMD, their hospital websites, things like this. ChatGPT doesn't do that. So is it a trustworthy tool?
I mean, GPT-4, I guess, it does through new Bing. It provides users, and I guess understanding what ChatGPT is. It's been developed by OpenAI, and OpenAI co-funded by Microsoft. So new Bing has GPT-4 technology built within it. And then Microsoft have been able to layer in this ability to search the internet at the same time as using the chatbot. So it will, when you use new Bing, be able to provide a user access to kind of understanding where the information has come from.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying that the response that it will get will be correct or that people should use it, more so that the way in which that information is provided is a very digestible format that we would expect people to end up using. Now, in terms of whether it's from Google, New Bing, or ChatGPT, I don't think any of those sources do we think people can go to at any given time and get all the quality of the information that we would want. So we've got to be able to work with patients so that they can understand the limitations. But also the idea of just being ignorant to it and then just telling people not to, well, that's discordant with reality that more than 75% of people use Google in its current format as the first point of call to search for health information. So it's a complex system, and we've got to understand that this new way of searching is being uptaken. It will be used for health, even if we recommend maybe not to. But we do want to make sure that people understand probably what some of the limitations are, that health circumstances are different between different people. And it should just be a point of call for the engagement with clinicians, whether it's in oncology or in other areas, as just pieces of information to come to the conversation with.
Thank you. Yeah, it really feels like this technology is affecting industries really broadly, not just medicine. Everything from novelists to newspaper writers who are concerned about ChatGPT replacing them by reporting the news of the day, or exam boards, for example, concerned about the technology. So, Ganesh, what were your main concerns? Did you feel that your concerns were alleviated from the study, or were there things that were highlighted that you thought, hang on a minute, we're going to need to do something about this, put some guidelines in place, perhaps?
So when we did the study with the GPT-3 version, it was still nascent in terms of public access. And within the 6 months of November, then last year, and now by April, with the improved versions, some of the early problems like accuracy and referencing, they're all being improved in the newer versions. My main consideration would be a terminology called as a chatbot hallucination, which is, again, making plausible statements without necessarily checking the factual truth. And that is a problem still not surmounted by these models. I'm hoping with the future iterations, that problem may or may not be easily sorted out. Until those fact-looking statements are removed from the responses, or at least highlighted in some way that this is all made up by the model and not necessarily established fact from the sources. Until then, we still have to take it with a pinch of salt, in my view. And also looking at the training sources for these chatbots. If it was trained using resources which have been fact-checked, accurate, then it's a reliable source. At the moment, it's unclear. I was reading somewhere that Google trained their model using 1.6 trillion parameters for their Bard chatbot. Humanly, I can't do it. And this model's making it easier to access that level of information and summarizing it. So sometimes it could be lost in translation as well. So the other consideration in terms of non-English speaking patients and consumers, some of the translation chatbots, right, again, more than 90 different languages are available in ChatGPT, but it still doesn't understand the idioms and phrases which are unique to those languages and misinterpret those information.
Oh, perhaps not unlike Google Translate with that one. And this leads me really nicely into something that I did notice in the study, which I thought was fascinating, Ash, which was about, you had some concerns about the tone of voice that a chatbot used. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, well, I think it's both a strength and a weakness. In terms of a weakness, well, maybe it's coming at the point of a strength. To some questions, like, is a cough associated with lung cancer? If you search that question on Google, the likely answer is yes, cough is associated with lung cancer. And that can be the end of the Google feature snippet. So some of the power of ChatGPT is around being able to contextualize that information to say that, yes, lung cancer and cough, they can come together. But there are also many other reasons that you may have a cough, and give some suggestions to thresholds as to when it's saying you should talk to a clinician. So it's kind of this very human-like way in which it interacts is a strength. But when it comes to, I guess, the AI hallucinations that Ganesh is kind of alluding to, which is where it's begun a response. It's begun a prediction of what it thinks the string of words should be to the question, to the prompt that's been given to it, but it's actually gone off in a divergent kind of fashion to not be in alignment with what you would associate with being the right answer. But once it's gone off in that direction, it still has this capacity to provide a very convincing answer. So it'll be providing you a very convincing answer that's wrong, and to an uneducated person, which is to say a lot. I will ask it questions that I'm not particularly well educated on. You can't tell that you're looking at the wrong question. And that, I think, is where I was suggesting towards tone. But it sits within the technology's strength and weakness.
Yes, exactly. And it still comes back to these very human behaviors. So, say, for example, take myself, I spend a lot of time reading lots of papers, lots of medical information about things. I'd like to think that whilst I am in no way a doctor, I'm fairly educated when it comes to interpreting what might be good medical advice and bad medical advice that you get from Google. But say, for example, I'm going to say right now, sorry, Dad, but say, for example, someone like my dad, who is someone who loves YouTube videos because he likes listening to people. And he'll call me up and he'll be like, oh, I just watched this YouTube video from this American doctor about this new diet, blah, 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 something. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but where is it from? You know, you can't believe everything you hear on the internet. And so I guess that's one of the things that piqued my interest about this study is you noticing how that tone, someone speaking in a way that they come across as very educated, can really misinform and ultimately perhaps raise false hopes for a cancer patient who's looking for information.
I was going to add in the emotional side of things, although it was not in our study, Another research group has compared ChatGPT generated responses with physician generated responses on Reddit platform.
Mm-hmm.
And the result of this paper was showing that ChatGPT is performing better in terms of empathy and quality of responses than medical practitioner, physician provided responses. That was interesting to me because if AI chatbots could be trained to be more empathetic and having quality responses generated, can physicians as human be trained? That's where the variation and the way human nature comes in. Physicians are humans too. They are not going to be robotic in the way they're going to talk and provide a response to the same question.
Yes, exactly. Right. Everybody has a bad day, but except ChatGPT. It's fascinating. So thank you. You've been listening to the Oncology Podcast's Experts on Point series, brought to you by the Oncology Network. To hear more podcast episodes, head over to our oncology portal at www.oncologynetwork.com.au. Registration is free for healthcare professionals and will give you access to exclusive content such as our diagnostic series, Beyond the Slide. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your colleagues and don't forget to listen to the end of the conversation in episode 19 of Experts on Point. You'll find it on our websites or via your favourite podcast streaming app. This is Rachael Babin and this is the Oncology Podcast.